Happy St. Patrick's Day, Dr. Dan the Preacher Man. And I've been reading this book, The Celtic Way of Evangelism by George G. Hunter III. I find it to be an excellent book. It helps us to understand how Christianity came to Ireland by way of the Irish. And of course, a lot of it deals with St. Patrick, whom we're celebrating today. And St. Patrick is a fascinating study. In fact, I did a doctoral dissertation on what we can learn from the evangelism and mission work of Ireland from the period about the 3rd century to about the 9th century, because that was that time when they were pretty much separate from the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church. In fact, at one time it was all one church, but because of cultural differences, politics, things changed over time. And what's interesting about St. Patrick at the time, the church was becoming the one that was closest to him, the Roman Church, was more influenced by the Roman culture than by Christian doctrine. And part of that was influenced by the politics. It was a good thing that Rome legalized Christianity and stopped persecuting the church, but then they made a mistake, and the church went along with it, which I believe was a mistake, requiring all Roman citizens to be Christian. And what that does, that dilutes evangelism. It dilutes the church. We are saved by faith. This is an interaction between God and man, and the gospel work and the Holy Spirit bringing it all together. We are to be born again and then be baptized as a public act of our witness. With that, you had a lot of people who would just get baptized just so they could be a Roman citizen. I mean, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Anyways, Patrick, a brief bio, a young boy, born in Britain. Irish pirates came across raiding the coast, and he was kidnapped along with a bunch of other captives. I said there was about thousands of them that were taken to Ireland to be slaves. He's there for a few years. During that time, as he's tending the cattle out in the fields, he comes to Christ. All his the catechisms and what we would call Sunday school lessons, the lessons of the church that were taught, because he couldn't escape it. His grandfather was a priest. His father was a deacon in the church. He has his conversion moment. He's born again. And then he has that moment when he's woken up in a dream, and he has a way of escape. He finds his way to the coast. He finds his way on a ship, and he finds his way back home, and he enters the ministry. At the age of 48, he has a dream very similar to what Paul had in the book of Acts, where the Apostle Paul talks about his failure to enter in Galatia to minister to the churches there a second time. But he has this vision of a man in Macedonia who says, "Come on over here," because God was working among the people in Greece, and there Paul would extend the gospel mission work. At the age of 48, Patrick gets his call. The average life expectancy was 45 at that time. I find that interesting, that 3 years beyond the normal life expectancy, this man is called to go on mission. And he lived to be, I believe, 76, 77, 78 years old. Don't quote me on that. But over 700 churches, depending upon which books you read and research. All I know, it was a lot. He was a busy man. But he didn't do it by himself, because as I read this book, he went with a team, a mission team. Is basically what he did was take basically a church, a congregation of people that he recruited, and they went with him. He had men in training to be priests. He had logistic people. He had already ordained priests that were with him. And this was at the right time, because God chooses the time. The Druid religion was being shaken up. There was internal politics going on, a fight going on between primarily the group called the Druids, the actual priesthood class, and the bards who took care of the poetry, the history, the teachings, and the singing, the music. And the Irish chieftains who ruled each of the little clans were sitting on the sidelines wondering what was going on. What was important to them was that the Druids would educate the royalty or the children of the chieftains. St. Patrick understood the culture. He understood the language. And he also understood that the Irish were semi-nomadic. They would have temporary camps for a while in one place until the cattle would eat up all the grass, and they would go to another place. So there were no permanent establishments. So the first chieftain he meets when he arrives there, he asks for a patch of land to build in this settlement. So the early towns that were built in Ireland at that time were all built by Christians as part of their mission work. They would have settled communities. And he also, and part of his discussions and talk with the chieftain, asked if he could educate the kids. And this was the right time. And so he did. And he would ask to establish a chapel, a place of worship. And he would leave one of his seminarians there, or one of his priests, to be ordained for the work there. And he would move on. And he would do this over and over again. So in time he had a chieftain's son now ordained as a priest because he trained him. Of course, the person was converted too. And this is how he would work. He got to know the culture. Now there's also stories about miracles and how he chased the snakes out of Ireland and all that stuff. Well, it's interesting that the snakes actually was probably a symbol of the Druids on their staff, and what actually happened was the influence of the Druids slowly disappearing from Ireland. And he also understood the culture. He was able to bring Christianity into the culture of the Celts without Romanizing it. That's an important concept, because I understand that a lot of the bishops from Rome, when they would go out to establish missions, one of the things that they had to do was civilize the savages to Roman ways. That was their thinking. See, Rome thought they were the only civilized people in the world, which is a mistake. But that's that cultural ethnic centricity that people often suffer with even today. And so this idea that we have to make you like a Roman citizen, and then we'll bring the gospel as well. Patrick brought the gospel first. He brought it within the context with the understanding of the culture. So I love what I've learned from that mission work today should be more cultural sensitive and find ways to penetrate the culture, find the points of contacts where the gospel can cross over. We don't have to westernize, as we do today, a culture that's not Western, but we can certainly bring the gospel into the culture of those people to transform them. And that's the gift, I believe, that St. Patrick has given us, that we should be celebrating today. Take care, and God bless.